Note that this episode contains discussion of sexual assault and abuse that some listeners may find disturbing. Please take care of yourself.
Across humanity, stories witness us, and through them we see, we hear, and we grow. I'm Pauline Chu.
And I'm Peter Rizzi, and this is Book Feels, a podcast about how books made us feel and how we feel about books.
Oh my God, Peter. It's the season finale.
Wow.
Final episode.
Can you believe it? What started with a conversation walking around Harvard Square almost a year ago now, and we've recorded an entire podcast season.
We have, and it's been so fun. So for this final episode, we're going to be covering a couple of poems and quotes. So a little different. We're not going to be doing narrative books or anything like that. And for the most part, we won't be able to read the full poem, but we will try our best to give context to the stanzas we do read. And for some of the quotes, we'll obviously read the whole quote. And for any short poem, we'll try our best to read the whole poem. So yeah, Peter, let's talk about, this is the last episode of the season. Let's talk about how you felt about this experience.
Yeah. How did I feel? I mean, just it's funny to think back, this was kind of your brainchild. You had been wanting to do this for some time, and you told me about it, and I just had this thought one day. I was like, what if I could be Pauline's co-host? And this could be more than just a thought. It could be an actual podcast season.
Yeah, I literally have been walking around this idea for a couple of years because I couldn't find what I wanted on Spotify podcasts. I really wanted a podcast about books, but that was more of an emotional analysis, and everything I could find was more of a recap podcast, or sometimes great podcasts like On Being or Poetry Unbound sort of addressed what I wanted, but not exactly. And I just had this I just wish there was a podcast about books that heal us and how we feel about them, and just the gooiness that I am in a podcast, and the fact that you even wanted to co-host was amazing to me.
I mean, I've always loved listening to podcasts. I've always thought it would be fun to host a podcast. I love to chat. I mean, and I think our creative and emotional energies, we've always known, play really well off of each other.
Totally.
And it just felt like a good project for us.
Yeah. Are there any things that you particularly enjoyed, or anything that surprised you this past year with me?
Well, it's funny. I feel like earlier on, there were some things about me that surprised you. That you'd mentioned, I don't know, maybe just you got to see more of me than you had previously.
I did, yeah.
But I feel like with me, you're a pretty open book. So there wasn't a lot
You did know me really well.
I didn't know before we got into this. But I think I just had way more fun than I knew I would have. It was genuinely a really fun time. And I mean, we haven't had any outside feedback yet. No one has listened to us, but we like listening to ourselves a lot. We listen to these episodes and we think they're great. So
hopefully people agree with
us.
Yeah, I think, obviously you and I do know each other really well, but there were some stories that you told me that I was oh, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know, in this episode, we're going to talk about how your dad read you poetry when you were little. And I didn't know about that until this podcast. And I love learning things about you.
It was a reason for me to remember that too, which was quite nice.
Yeah. So this is amazing. I'm so glad we had a year of recording this amazing season, and I'm just grateful to have you as a co-host.
Grateful for you too, Pauline. It was a ton of fun, and hope this finds some listeners who love our work as much as we do.
Yay, enjoy the final episode.
So for our final episode / bonus episode of season 1,
yay!
Pauline, our resident poet, thought it'd be a fun idea for us to do poetry. Something a little different. Normally we're doing a story that has a narrative format, and this is going to be a little bit more casual. Us just talking about some poems, or in my case, because I'm not as much of a poem reader as Pauline, some prayers and spiritual quotes that really spoke to us over the years. And to get it kicked off, I really turned back the clock and went all the way back to this book of poems that my dad used to read to me as a kid. It's called A Visit to William Blake's Inn. It's written by Nancy Willard. And it's just this collection of poems centering on a child's experience of visiting an inn belonging to William Blake, who is this famous poet. And it's a very cozy book of poems. I think in these first couple poems we're going to cover, one from me and one from you, Pauline, we're really covering the like vast expanse of poetry, and that poetry can be so many different things. I think for me, this first poem from A Visit to William Blake's Inn, it's called A Rabbit Reveals My Room.
What a cute title.
It's a cute title and a cute poem. It's this poem that my dad used to read to me before bed. And I don't know, I guess like as a kid, there's something about poetry that even if you can't quite put together like the more higher level concepts that are being shown through the poetry, there's something nice about like rhyming words. And
yeah, it's very melodic.
In this poem in particular, like cozy critters, like it's about this kid getting into bed, but his bed is a bear. And the bear is like, you will find my fur soft as the hay in your loft, and my paws make an admirable seat.
Aww.
It's just like so cozy and sweet.
Can I ask how old you were? If you remember.
Mean, take it all the way back to like 3, 4, 5, and probably even until I was like 6 or 7.
Oh my God, Peter, that's like maybe one of my favorite things I've learned about you is that like your dad used to read you poetry.
Yeah, really sweet. And I feel like this was one of those things where like, you know, I don't know if you experienced this in childhood where like you get a little bit older and then you want to go back to a previous stage of childhood.
Yeah.
So then like I'd probably hit like 10 years old and try to get my dad to like read me this again.
Oh.
And I don't know if he would have.
Oh my God, that's like an Inside Out with nostalgia. Like your nostalgia was activated really early.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. When you sent me this poem and I read it, I just thought it was the sweetest thing because I'm used to I've read poetry for a lot of my life, but I think I've always been fascinated with sad poetry, even when I was a child. So to read a poem that's so soft and so nice, like you feel kindness in the poem itself. It's so lovely, and I can't imagine. It just never occurred to me that you could use poetry to bond with your child and to create like a soft world. Yeah, it was beautiful when I read it.
As we said, kind of covering the gamut with what poetry can be. Like you said, it can be a way to connect with your kid, a way to build a cozy environment, a bedtime story, like create a sense of warmth before going to bed. It can also be used to describe the immense suffering and pain of the world in a way that prose can't always do. Poetry is a little bit more artful, a little bit more descriptive, and a little bit more expansive with how the words are used and how things are portrayed. And we have this poem that you chose by Paul Tran. Do you want to say more about this poem?
Sure, yeah. So this poem is called Heirloom. It's by Paul Tran. You could find it in Cleaver magazine. I read it first in a poetry anthology called Inheriting the War, which is a collection of prose and poetry pieces by Vietnam veterans and refugees as well as their descendants. And this was a very on-theme poem because it is literally about the things we inherit. And as you said, poetry is different from prose. There's something about the spaciousness of poetry, each word can be interpreted in many different ways, especially when paired in like a unexpected way. And I think that creates space to give more meaning to each like stanza or each line, and you can interpret that as an individual and put your own emotions. It has enough space to capture the complexity of your emotions and your thoughts. So what Paul Tran writes like in Heirloom is and we can't read the whole poem, but it is about it's a pantoum, which, do you know what a pantoum is, Peter? Okay. It's a Malaysian form of poetry that is a little hard to explain, but basically it's composed of 4 lines per stanza, and each line is repeated in various forms in different stanzas until it like loops back in on itself in the last stanza, and some of the lines from the first stanza end up in the last stanza. So it's like a circular kind of ruminative poem. It's very good for for talking about subjects that are like that you're dwelling on, things that you can't really find your way out of. It's a really effective poem form for those types of topics. And so this topic is about generational trauma, particularly as it pertains to sexual abuse and sexual assault. And the speaker in the poem talks about their mother, who may or may not have been sexually assaulted by a pirate escaping Vietnam. And the speaker then talks about how they were raped by their father, and how there's also ambiguity there of like it may or may not have happened depending on who you talk to. Like the mother denies that it happened. The father says it didn't happen, but the speaker knows that it did. I think there's so much like truth and like harshness in the poem. And speaking as somebody who, also has a history of sexual assault and whose family probably also does as well, it just captures so much pain and anger, and like longing and love, like all these things that like feel like they're too much for one body to handle. There's a lot of space in the poem for all of those things.
You talking about this pantoum form and the circularity of the poem, it helped me get in touch with what I liked about this poem was that, like you said, first it's the mother's story, and there's this ambiguity about whether or not she was raped. She denies it, but maybe it happened. And then the same circularity is then kind of applied to the next generation.
Yeah.
Where the narrator says they were assaulted by their father, the mother denies it. And why I thought we should include this poem in this episode is it's talking about something in very clear and plain language that we really don't talk about that much.
Yeah.
Sexual violence.
Yeah.
And its prevalence, it's everywhere. And to really bring it to life in a poem like this where, they're not sparing words. The word rape is used. The word, it's a violent poem.
Yeah.
But like you said, it captures all the different facets of this really, really terrible part of the human experience that is so pervasive.
It also, I think that it does a great job. Like Paul Tran is an amazing artist and poet. They do a great job in like blending history and present. I'll read a couple of lines. A pirate leads my mother from the boat to the shore. He strips her down to her soiled cotton underwear, feeds her aching body to the ocean's blue mouth. She swears he did not rape her. And then the next stanza says, when he strips me down to my cotton underwear, my father sets me on his lap like a Barbie doll. My mother swears he did not rape me. She tells me to stop making things up. I just think that that's like such a chilling part of the poem, how it circles back on itself. The cotton underwear in particular is a really striking image of like innocence. And I just, it's such an affecting poem for me. And the first time I read it, I think I had to put the book down and just kind of sit for a while. I mean, the poem really hurt for me to read, because it's about a hard subject matter. I think anything about sexual assault is going to be hard to read, especially if, like myself, if you're a victim of or survivor of any sort of sexual abuse or sexual trauma. But the poem also really ends on something that feels fierce to me. I'll read a bit more. My mother still sees the pirate in her dreams. The ocean's infinite hunger swallows her in its waves. She wakes and pretends it never happened. But truth finds a way to exact its obscene measures, even when denial appears to be our only choice to survive. Rising from the waves, I refuse to pretend it never happened. My father rapes me while my mother is asleep in the other room. Even when denial appears to be our only choice to survive, we know how the story goes. And the beginning of the poem starts with that line, we know how the story goes. And it just, when it took me decades to tell my mom about my sexual abuse, about what happened. And, she did feel bad for a little bit, but then she immediately rushed pretty quickly into, it's time to move on from the past. Like, let's not talk about it anymore, kind of. Like, let's not think about unpleasant things. It happened and it's over. And I remember having to tell her, like, it's not over. It's like in my body. It's going to be in me for as long as I live. I will be a better person and I can be a better person in general. But it happened, and it's in a way it's still happening. And the fierceness that this poem has at the end of it, like this fire that Paul Tran brings to their poem, it feels like poetry can be our source of solace when the people, when we don't have anyone else to turn to. Like my mother was somebody who I really, really wanted to provide that comfort and solace, and to be protective, perhaps, or to care, or to be able to show her care. She's somebody who that's really hard for her to do. And I know poetry isn't the same as having, a loving parent, but it's a place where at least I feel like I'm not alone. And I'm just so grateful to Paul Tran.
I can see how this poem was difficult for you to read at first, and how, like you said, it's validating.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm not alone in this.
I'm not alone, and also somebody else survived. Like, someone else survived their mom denying their pain and
wrote about it.
And then that poem reached me. And who knows how many other people it reached. I believe in the strength of poetry for that reason. And that's why I write. So, yeah, poetry has this capability of making us feel not alone, because it's a great place to show all the ranges of human emotion. And as a human, you can relate to poems and feel seen and heard. But I think also what we've talked about is like poetry also helps foster imagination. And it's not just poetry. Obviously, we're covering multiple things today. But this is something that we also really care about for this in this podcast is making is imagining, more for us and more for this world.
The next thing I thought of to bring for this episode, it's this quote from C.S. Lewis that I found, I would say in like my late teenage years, some point in high school. And it really changed my worldview. It spoke to a sort of deep feeling I'd always had, but couldn't really put words to.
Right.
I'll read the quote. I think it's from Mere Christianity, one of his books. The Christian says, creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. A baby feels hunger, while there is such a thing as food. A duckling wants to swim, while there is such a thing as water. Men feel sexual desire, while there is such a thing as sex. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, that does not prove that the universe is a fraud. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it, to suggest the real thing. If that is so, I must take care, on the one hand, never to despise or to be unthankful for those earthly blessings, and on the other, never to mistake them for the something else of which they are only a kind of copy, or echo, or mirage. I must keep alive in myself the desire for my true country, which I shall not find till after death. I must never let it get snowed under or turned aside. I must make it the main object of life to press on to that country and to help others do the same. So, as Pauline pointed out when I first showed her this quote, this is a deeply Christian quote.
So Christian.
A deeply logical Christian quote. It's really an argument for the existence of heaven, the existence of God. And to me, it's just like I said, I had this deep sense that there were little pieces of this world that aroused this feeling that there must be more to this world. There must be more to these pleasures that, or not these pleasures, but these feelings that kind of went like never satiated by this world. And that if I could perceive that, that means that there must be something else better than this world as I currently experience it.
Right. Than what we have now.
Right. Because I could feel deep in my heart that things could be better, and so at the time I was like, oh, this is so relieving, because it's like, yeah, this world kind of sucks. Like, I had it. There were some things that I really liked about my life as a teenager, and there were some things that left me like with this deep emptiness. And to have this promise from C.S. Lewis, this theologian, that, oh, of course it is, because you aren't meant for this world. You're meant for God's heaven.
Yeah.
It was like
Something
so
better.
comforting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I know you've mentioned to me that you were pretty religious when you were younger, and now not so much. And what does this quote mean to you now that you read it again?
Yeah, for a long time, it was this sense of, oh, I can connect this to my religion, to this idea that, this world is one of suffering and sin, and
Mm,
that I must just do my best and continue on. And, when I die, which he literally says in this poem, until I shall not find it until after death, I'll be able to experience true happiness and true joy. And, my relationship with religion, with Christianity has changed a lot. I'm no longer a Christian. I I had certain experiences with the church, with people in the church that really made me question
right.
um, that religious practice. And I'll never forget something I heard once that kind of changed the way I view this quote is someone said that in their spirituality, they view heaven and earth as one and the same.
Mm,
And this idea that, no, wait, I can create that world that I
yeah.
want and that I long for right here, right now.
Yeah. If
There's
you can
nothing
feel it,
keeping
it can
me from
exist.
doing that,
Yeah.
from doing it to the best of the possible ability I can, and from fighting for that world,
Hmm.
because that world that I want is the world I want for everyone, for all human beings.
Yeah.
And that is something that really drives me today, is that, like, we can take an active role in creating a better world, a world that we all want here and now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my spiritual tradition,
Yeah, that's
is
very empowering.
practicing, not that I have to wait until death to experience these unsatiated desires, as C.S. Lewis puts them, but that
Right.
I can really create the world that I want here and now.
I love that. I love that reading of this quote because when you had first put it in front of me, I was like, "Ooh." Like, I think it was lovely until that one part where he was like after death or whatever, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." But I now that you've kind of given me that perspective, I think it is like so beautifully said that if you can feel that something's missing, that missing something exists. Like this idea of like a duckling wants to swim well, there's such a thing as water. That's a beautiful way of putting that. So what in from that perspective, what's your water, you know?
Mm, I think it's that I want a world full of love,
Mm,
that prioritizes love, that prioritizes helping each other.
yeah.
And I can find spaces where I can create that.
Yeah, I think you
Communities,
already create it.
friendships,
I, like, see it in
relationships.
action.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and, believing that ripple effect, that the goodness I put into the world can multiply.
Mm,
And yeah, like a duckling wants to swim. Like, I want to live in a world where we uplift each other and love on each other and take care of each other. And I might as well create that in my relationships. And that's hard. It's not
yeah.
always easy because we don't choose the relationships that we're born into. And having to say, I'm going to make things better for myself and I'm going to do whatever it takes to do that. It's a hard promise to live into, but for me, like, obviously an ongoing process, but it's been a tremendously rewarding one.
Yeah, and I think that's something you and I have learned is that love maybe looks different from what we were taught it looks like. It looks like, you know, like self-care as well, and it looks like boundaries, and it looks like practicing non-harm and non-harmful speech. It's yeah, and I agree with you. That's also part of my value system, and that's probably why we're such good friends. I believe in our ability to generate and cultivate that love within ourselves and have it ripple out to others. And that really, I've mentioned this poem before as my source of comfort and strength. This next poem I'm going to read really embodies that. This is For Warmth by Thich Nhat Hanh, and it can be found in his collection of poems called Call Me by My True Names, which was published in 1993. I hold my face in my two hands. No, I am not crying. I hold my face in my two hands to keep the loneliness warm. Two hands protecting, two hands nourishing, 2 hands preventing my soul from leaving me in anger. And that is, this is a very Buddhist poem because, it is saying, yes, you have a right to your anger. You have a right to your really like powerful and sometimes like violent emotions, anger, sadness, etc. Um, but you have a responsibility for self-compassion and for holding your anger and your loneliness and keeping them warm and keeping them with you. And you do not have a right to destroy. And that I believe if we were all able to embody that feeling, the butterfly effect would be immense. It would really change the world profoundly.
I think we talk about this often, that loving others has to start with loving ourselves.
Yes.
And I feel like this poem really represents that. Like, Thich Nhat Hanh is caring for himself on such a deep level. Just his face and his hands.
Yeah.
Hands protecting, hands nourishing, hands preventing my soul from leaving me in anger. Every time, just hearing you read this poem, it really moved me.
I love this poem, and I'm going to plug one of my favorite podcasts, On Being, because they have an amazing interview with Thich Nhat Hanh where he reads this poem in both English and Vietnamese and kind of says what we just talked about, how that we have a responsibility to ourselves and subsequently to the world. And we are strong enough to love both of those things. Peter, is there anything in your life or in your past that this resonates with?
Yeah, this 2 hands protecting, 2 hands nourishing, 2 hands protecting my soul from leaving me in anger. I think for me, anger has never been an emotion that I've felt super strongly and super consistently. I am, you know me, like I really just try so desperately to see the good in people.
You
And
do.
but I think what this poem really evokes for me, like when it says my soul from leaving me, is really like anger directed towards self and like self-hatred.
Yes.
And just the times when I've been at my lowest, I've been my hardest on myself. And sometimes it's literally just come down to this. I hold my face in my 2 hands to keep my soul from leaving me in anger, because I just have to trust that there's nothing wrong with me. Like I just have to hold myself. And sometimes that's what it takes to get through something difficult. Like there's no magic salve or like,
there's nothing to do but to feel it.
Witnessing yourself and 2 hands preventing my soul from leaving me, right? Like, and I think that's why I like this poem so much, is because it's nothing complicated. It's these hands keeping him warm and just
Buddhism
is
very simple, I think, in a lot of ways. I think that, depending on the type of Buddhism you practice, I think Thich Nhat Hanh practices a kind of a very simple version of it that's easy to follow, which is just like be with yourself. The context of this poem is they had just found out that these U.S. troops had bombed this village and completely destroyed it. And then they had said the reason they did that was to protect the village or to save the village. And they ended up completely killing everyone in it. And Thich Nhat Hanh and all of his, the other monks with him, they were so shocked by this news and I think so angry, because who does that? Who kills a person and says that it was meant to save them, And I feel similarly, like sometimes with anger, it can take over the body. It's such an intense emotion, and like it feels like it needs to manifest physically. Like I want to throw plates or something, and in your case, in your example, it can manifest in self-harm because you're so angry at something. And it's such a challenge, and it takes a lot of strength to just be with that anger and to hold it in your hands.
I've witnessed you in some of those moments and have just tried to remind you that, it's okay to feel this anger, and you're feeling it for a reason, but it sure is difficult.
It's so hard. I think what's good about our friendship is that we have each other when we're angry. And that's what I would encourage most people to have is to have other people who can understand you. Like, obviously, yes, you can also hold your anger alone, but to know that you don't have to hold any emotion alone is important.
Yeah, and someone who's not going to try to fix your anger or minimize it, but someone who can hold your anger with you.
Yeah.
We talked about the expansiveness of poetry, seeing us from childhood through violence. We talked about the intensity of feelings.
Yeah.
Longing, anger, And now I think we both want to bring some texts that allude to this process of surrender, of letting go to the absurdity that is the human experience.
One of the
And
hardest things to do is to let go of.
absolutely. And what I brought for this section is another bit of Christian text.
Are you trying to convert me, Peter?
I'm a missionary. It's called the Merton Prayer. It's by Thomas Merton. He was a theologian, I think, during the 20th century. He had this book called Thoughts in Solitude, and I love the Merton Prayer. We talked about this poem I first brought that I liked as a young child, the C.S. Lewis quote I found as a teenager, and this is really something I found as a young adult when I was at my absolute lowest and I needed help. I'm going to read the poem. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone.
What does that mean to you, Peter?
I can remember when I felt lost and in the shadow of death, and this promise that God is ever with me and will never leave me to face my perils alone, and that he'll lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. And for me to just say, my Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. It's exactly what we said. It's surrender. And it's, trusting that things can get better. And it's being not alone in like the depths of, this book is called Thoughts in Solitude. I don't know the context with which he wrote it, but I can imagine it was maybe during a time where he was feeling a lot of solace. And yeah, just to have someone to talk to, someone to turn things over to help me get through a difficult time.
When you were really alone.
When I was really alone, it evokes a lot of emotion, even just rereading it now. And we talk about this a lot when doing healing work and going through a dark night of the soul, whatever you want to call it. It requires a leap of faith.
It really does.
Come out the other side, to change yourself on a really deep level. And yeah, it's like, I don't know what I'm doing right now, but trusting in something, trusting in some process that you're moving towards some light. And that's what I think this poem really, really elucidates.
Yeah, it's really hard to just kind of be on your own. I think that a lot of healing, we've talked about this a lot in this podcast, that your healing journey is your own. No one can do it for you. And in that, there is a lot of loneliness. You have to face your pain yourself. And that is really hard. And a lot of people will kind of do the 1 foot in, 1 foot out, kind of like the hop, the healing hop, because it's so painful to go all in. And to go all in does mean that leap of faith, because you don't know what's going to happen next. Like, I think a lot of healing, especially if you've suffered like particular trauma, and have built a world around yourself to kind of protect yourself from old demons, that world will come apart when you start to heal, and you won't know what's going to come next. And you just have to trust that whatever will come next will be good. I really relate to that. I really also struggled when I first started this journey. And I remember telling a friend, because a lot of my life was falling apart. And I told a friend, like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm going to make it, like, I don't know if any of this is worth it. And, I'm so glad I kept going. I think it was extremely worth it. But I'm not going to lie, it was hard as hell. And I do want to talk about what comes when you get to the other side of it. And, this is just my experience, and I guess yours too, Peter. Like, I cannot speak for everybody. I think everyone has their own road that they go down. But I also want to talk about this poem called Someday I'll Love Ocean Vuong by Ocean Vuong, who is one of my favorite poets. We've talked about him before. This poem was published in Night Sky with Exit Wounds in 2016, and it's just lovely. I won't read the whole poem, but it is essentially about coming to understand and accept the world, and then coming to understand and accept yourself, which I think is what comes after that dark night of the soul. I'll just read a passage of it. Don't be afraid. The gunfire is only the sound of people trying to live a little longer and failing. Ocean, ocean, get up. The most beautiful part of your body is where it's headed. And remember, loneliness is still time spent with the world. Yeah, I just think that's so beautiful. It's so accepting of it's so compassionate. This idea that gunfire is only the sound of people trying to live a little longer, because it is easy to just hate, and to have such understanding in one sentence, and then for also this self-compassion for having loneliness, and recognizing that your life is miraculous, and you yourself are a miracle. I just think that's, I don't know, I think that's what at least that's the conclusion I came to after many, many years of working on my trauma.
This stanza captures both of what you said, the acceptance of the world that, yeah, there's gunfire, and this is people who are just trying, and accepting that. And then the second part of the stanza, and remember, loneliness is still time spent with the world. The acknowledgement that you may need to be lonely, but that, this most beautiful part of your body is where it's headed. Like that, you're not doing anything wrong. You're accepting yourself. And I mean, I know you and I have talked a lot about the loneliness you've felt during these last few years, the relationships that have changed, and the loneliness that you still feel.
Yeah.
What does this poem evoke for you as it relates to loneliness?
I think that something that I've been thinking about a lot is that maybe I think everyone says this, that everyone's lonely, and that's part of the human condition. And I've always understood that as a concept, but now I'm not necessarily seeing it as a bad thing. It's kind of like what Ocean says of loneliness is still time spent with the world. Like, you're not alone. You have yourself. And you is pretty great. The you that you are is wonderful. And I think I didn't understand that about myself until a couple of years ago, that I am a wonderful human. And I would extend that thought to our listeners as well, that you are a wonderful human, and that your life is worth living, even and you're lonely. It's not despite loneliness. It is, you are lonely and your life is worth living. And I think that's the conclusion. I won't read it, but the poem kind of talks about, it ends with Ocean, the speaker being in a room and saying that the room will feel so much like home, that it'll feel like your skin, basically, that you will be your own home wherever you are. You will be, quote unquote, that island that won't flood, which is also a Buddhist concept and saying. Yeah. Is there anything that, I don't know, how do you think that relates to your life, Peter?
Well, the part of the poem that I really liked when you read is ocean, ocean, get up. Just this loving call towards oneself.
Yeah.
I love the way the poem is written, that it's called Someday I'll Love Ocean Vuong, and his name is Ocean Vuong.
Yeah.
Just the compassion that exudes from this poem. What are we if we're not just going to be so compassionate with ourselves? Why would we not be? And
we're all we have.
Yeah, just to extend that to myself, and like you, to extend that to the listeners. Just ocean, ocean, get up.
Yeah.
The most beautiful part of your body is where it's headed. Just such a loving, compassionate outreach.
Yeah. I think for some context, the book, Night Sky with Exit Wounds, it really is about Ocean's father, who I don't think he really knew. And this poem, Someday I'll Love Ocean Vuong, is the second to last poem in that collection. And it kind of begins with like you and your father, like it begins with that relationship of the father and ocean. And then ends with the relationship with the self, because that's what's the most important relationship in one's life. And then the final poem in that collection is and kind of an amalgamation that like it takes many different lines from many different poems in that book and creates another poem. It's like you're remaking yourself constantly. And it doesn't matter because all of it is worth it. Like your efforts in this world are worth it. So we're this is a pretty heavy episode, Peter.
I'll say.
So we do want to remind the listeners, because I love my sad girl poetry. I'm a very angsty girl, but the poetry can also be delightful. This is a really short poem, so I think it's okay to read it. It is about this wonderment of the world. It's called I Go Down to the Shore, and it's by Mary Oliver, and you can find it in 1,000 Mornings, which was published in 2012. I go down to the shore in the morning, and depending on the hour, the waves are rolling in or moving out. And I say, oh, I am miserable. What should I do? And the sea says in its lovely voice, excuse me, I have work to do.
What's so delightful about that poem for you?
I love it. It's just like this, it's like the world keeps turning. You were so small, we're all such small creatures. The ocean is so much vaster than us. And just this like really sweet voice saying, excuse me, I have work to do. Like, your little problems, like it really puts your problems into perspective. And, like the sea itself is so delightful. Like, how can you not delight in the ocean while also feeling miserable? Like there's so much wonderment around you to notice.
I tell you this often, I never feel more at peace than when I'm by the ocean or by running water. There's something, like you said, that just makes everything feel a lot less serious.
Yeah.
Like the ocean is so vast and has work to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a world in the ocean that has nothing to do with us. That is like, I don't know. It just takes, at least for me, it takes me out of myself to remember like, oh, I'm this like one small thing that's only going to be here for a little while, It takes the pressure off.
We've been having a long, cold, snowy Boston winter, and what I wouldn't give to sit my butt down on the hot sand and just look at the ocean coming in for a while. Oh my gosh.
And you and I also have like a very particular like attachment to North Carolina beaches.
Yeah.
I agree. I think nature in general, I feel very close to something bigger than myself. But particularly the ocean, I agree with you, I just feel more at peace, and I think I feel less pressure to be any certain way, because I think like it feels like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
We chose one other final delightful poem to end on that I think is just a good poem for this time we find ourselves in, with so much tumult in the world, in our U.S. politics. It's a really tough time to just see the humanity in other people and to want to believe in the goodness of each other. It's this poem called Small Kindnesses by Dausha Lameris. I think we found it in the New York Times. It was published in 2019 there, and it's from Healing the Divide, Poems of Kindness and Connection, one of this poet's publications. And it just describes the sweet nothings we sort of say to each other as humans, and how
that we don't even think about.
And that we're automatically wired towards kindness towards each other. The author kind of says that, saying bless you when someone sneezes is something left over from the bubonic plague, and that we're saying don't die when we're saying that to each other. And
which I never thought of.
No.
Like, bless you. Yeah, it probably is. Like, please don't die. I hope you don't die. Because in French, it's à tes souhaits, which means like to your wishes, basically. And I never thought about why they're different. Yeah. No.
She writes, mostly we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handling it, to smile at them and for them to smile back. And she ends the poem with, What if they are the true dwelling of the holy, these fleeting temples we make together when we say, here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first, or I like your hat.
Aw.
And yeah, just this, we don't really think about how much kindness we just as a default
Yeah.
show to each other in our culture as humans. And I think with all that is happening in our world right now, just like leaning on this and trusting this wiring towards kindness and towards togetherness that we all have, it's a lovely poem.
I think also not taking for granted that kindness. Like, I take it for granted all the time in the subway. In the poem it says, I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by. And that is a small kindness. I've never considered that a kindness. I just think, like, if somebody doesn't do it, I think it's rude. And so I take it for granted that this is a nice thing someone did for me. They could have just been rude. Yeah. I think it's important. I agree with you that in particular in these hard times, where there is a lot of hatred and a lot of an instinct towards irritability, I think, just like how I demonstrated with, like, oh, that's rude, versus looking at something and seeing what you do have, which is small kindness, which is people acknowledging that you're in a space near them and acknowledging you as a human being and saying hi to you or moving to let you by. I think that those are things that we take for granted every day.
I'm so glad we decided to end on this poem. And I'm sitting here just hoping that this finds its way to someone who's, it'll help as much as it helped us to
Yeah.
reflect on these poems and to remember these small kindnesses. And yeah, I'm here thinking, like, what ways do I want to be a little extra kind as I go about my day? And just
Yeah.
like this poet writes that, this is how we treat each other as human beings. And
Yeah. And to pay attention to it, that life is full of moments like this. I think how I want to end, Peter, is maybe can I hear about a time where you received a kindness or you gave a kindness?
There's 2 bus routes that drop off right outside my house, and
Yes.
I'm a frequent bus rider, and I am shown so much kindness when I'm checking my phone. I'm upstairs in my apartment and I'm seeing the bus is 1 minute away and I'm running down with my shoes untied and the bus is just passing the stop and I'm like waving my arms like, please stop for me, please stop for me. And I cut it too close every single time and the driver stops and I say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think that's one of the ways I show kindness is every time I get off the bus, I'm at the back of the bus, I always wave. I say, thank you to
Oh,
the bus driver. And even if I'm getting on and I'm in not as much of a rush, I'll just chat with the bus driver and say hello and ask them how they're doing. And yeah, like they get me around. They take me so many places
yeah.
and I would not be able to live my life without them.
And
And
they're so
so
generous in, like, letting you on when
they
you're late.
are, they are, they really are.
Shout
So
out to all the bus
shout
drivers.
out to
You're
the bus
great.
drivers. They are great. They are
Yeah.
all, for the most
We
part,
see
very
you.
great.
Yeah.
What about you, Pauline?
So recently I was locked out of my apartment, and it was a Sunday. It was Super Bowl Sunday out of all days. And it was so like icy in Boston as well and so cold. And I just like, my apartment building does have a like emergency service, like somebody who can let you in, but they have to drive all the way, like, I think from like Arlington or something. And the man who answered the phone was so kind and he called me darling and he was like, I'll be there soon, darling. Like, so we're not even in the South. Like, what, where's this coming from? And then when he let me in, he was just like, I was so apologetic because I felt really bad making him come to my apartment on a Sunday when there's like a Super Bowl happening, but also when it's icy and cold and like nobody wants to do that. And he took the time to do it and like was so, I don't know, it just made me feel better. Like, was like, what happens? People forget their keys, and it reminded me to be kind to myself.
Absolutely. I could see how that would be such a trigger to start being a little hard on yourself.
Yeah, like,
And
damn it, I forgot my keys.
it can be so healing to have someone receive us in a way that is just, oh, yeah, it's okay.
So generous.
Everybody forgets their keys sometimes.
Yeah, and to them, that probably costed them nothing. And I think like there's a lot of things that we can do that cost us nothing. Yeah, I hope that that's a takeaway from this episode. find Book Feels wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram at bookfeelspodcast or email us at bookfeelspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.